goodness. You are such an inspiration. Wow, you really are. You're so strong. Can I pet your service dog? Ugh. 1, 2, 3, let's go! We are artists, parents, teachers, good guys, bad guys, students, leaders. I'm not your inspiration, yeah, I'm fully who I am. Got my own expectations that don't fit into your plans. I'm not your sad story, so I wrote it in this song. Everything you know about disability is wrong. Yeah, everything you know. Yeah, everything you know about disability is wrong.
Hey listeners, and welcome to another episode of Everything You Know About Disability is Wrong. Today on the podcast, we have Annie Segarra.
Annie is a dedicated activist, content creator, and proud member of the LGBTQ plus community. Living with Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, she's well known for her advocacy in disability rights, body positivity, and social justice. Using her engaging videos and insightful discussions to raise awareness.
With a powerful voice and a commitment to inclusivity, Annie strives to make the world a more accepting and accessible place for everyone. Her work continues to challenge norms, celebrate diversity, and inspire meaningful change, particularly in the realm of chronic illness and disability activism. So Annie is a perfect guest for this show. All of the content she makes aligns so well with what we're doing here. Welcome to the show. We are so happy to have you.
Thank you
Before
so
we
much.
get Before we get into the full conversation, let's go ahead and do our audio descriptions. I can start. This is Lily speaking. I am a white passing mixed race person. I have literally split down the middle, half blonde, half brown hair, and I'm wearing my usual black turtleneck and the necklace that I will fidget with throughout the recording. Take it away, Erin.
Hi, this is Erin. I'm a white woman, Latina, with red hair, and I'm wearing a blue shirt, and I feel very comfortable in it. So I'll pass it to Annie.
All right. Hi, this is Annie. I am a, light brown skin Latina with long, extremely dark brown that it passes for black hair. And right now I'm wearing it down and to the side, but most likely over this podcast, I will be either braiding it or putting it up for like sensory issues that my hair will cause me. I am wearing glasses and a combination of a black tank top and a soft, like long sleeve blue shirt. And I'm currently in my bedroom where there's like cool ambiance lighting that makes me feel very comfortable, and like a plant in the corner and little lamps all over the place.
I was going to say I love your environment. It's very pretty.
Thank you. Thank you. It's funny how, like, I think for me, the way things look and accessibility always have to be combined. Like, I don't see why accessibility has to feel, I don't know. I don't know what's the right word for it, but like there is, how so many elementary schools, I don't know if this is true for everyone, but it is true for me. They are designed with like concrete walls and fluorescent lighting. And when you walk into an elementary school, sometimes like it feels like a prison because of that. I don't know what the right word for it is, but it's like this, it is a very cold environment with like cement and fluorescent lighting. It feels like it doesn't have what's the word I'm looking for? Like there is no attention being given to it. There's no care being given to it. So all that is to say, yeah, while I think I really like the way I've set up my bedroom aesthetically, most of the things that are pretty to the eye or drawing, inviting to the eye, it is also for accessibility purposes. So like the different lamps around the room so that I don't have to use the overhead because that is like a big sensory issue. And I also, for my brain, like to have all my furniture like convertible. Sorry, I hit my mic. Convertible into something else. So like the chair that I'm sitting on can be turned into a single size bed, and on and on. Like most of my furniture is there's words for that. But yeah, transformable into something else.
I love that. I know we were going to get into that at some point on the interview, so we can just do it now. But that, like, yeah, I get what you're saying of that. Like, sometimes when people think about like universal design or access in general, I do think it's that like cold kind of like checking boxes of like, well, this needs to do that. And I don't think people think about like the warmth of accessibility, and how like individualized spaces can be.
It's a lack of attention and care, and I think like there is this kind of unconscious unwelcome vibe that there is to that as well. Like, you're lucky that we created this accessibility for you to enter here, because the truth is we don't really want you here, but we have to have you here. So we're just gonna like we're just gonna make something up and not really give any attention and care to it. Kind of like the example of when a place has they claim to say we are wheelchair accessible, but then they they bring you inside the building through the trash can ramp through the back of the building, and it's like yeah. You're really acting like you want me here, like I'm welcome here when you do that. It wasn't an afterthought that I might be attending this space using a wheelchair, or that anyone might have to roll into the space for whatever reason. And I guess that's what I'm getting at, is that like the coldness of it can feel very uninviting and afterthought. So like I think if people really sit down to think about like how can we first of all make everybody feel welcome, and second of all make sure that it's not just welcoming in a logistic way, but welcoming in a comfort and aesthetic way.
Yeah, I like the idea too of like what works for how you need your space to work for your brain to work. Like, because I'm currently in the process of redoing my like office space, which is where I record in right now, and like I have my one little shelf here that feels like I like confined my autism to a single shelf in the room, because I was like, well, it needs to be, when I first set this up, it was like, it needs to be very professional. And I got a desk that felt like it was the right desk that should work very well. And it was a lot of shoulds. And now like I'm in a much better place in terms of like accommodating myself and adapting spaces. And I'm like, I don't actually need a desk. I need like a comfy couch that I can like curl up into and put a weighted blanket on and be on my laptop. Like I actually, why would I want, like I have a giant like L-shaped desk that feels very corporate, and I'm constantly like knocking into it or like hurting myself on it. And it's like, one day I was just like, wait, actually I can redo this. Like I can make this space look how I want it to. And honestly, I was very inspired. Erin, the room you're in right now, I got to go there in person. It looks like a fairy tale princess bedroom. Like there's books all over the walls and lights, and I love it. And I was like, this is the type of space, if I'm going to be working in this all day, I want my books everywhere and I want comfort. And I love that you brought up the adaptable couch, because I'm really interested in that too, because it feels like it would be like, I've seen some of the ones that they almost spread out into what looks like kind of like a play mat, where, and I love sitting on the floor, so I'm thinking about doing something like that.
That would be great. Yeah, I would say in line with what you're saying, my desk setup whenever, because usually, honestly, I'm a chronically ill person that enjoys working from bed. So like either it's like one of those lap tables, or what I would really like is one of those like twistable, almost hospital bed style desk where it's like L shaped and you can just kind of bring the table over your bed.
Cool.
But what I actually do right now, where I'm sitting right now, is this is where my bed normally is, and it's a Murphy bed. I fold it up.
Cool.
Fold it up so this the wall I'm touching to my right is the bottom of my bed. In the corner, I have this kind of like a big, what do they call it? It's not a love seat. Love seat is for two people, but a big chair, a big armchair. And I bring it over to where my bed is, or where it was, and right by the wall, I have one of those tables that folds into a little tiny rectangle, and I pull it out and I open up a desk.
Nice.
Right in the space where my bed normally is. So I'm here in my comfy like armchair. I have this, popped up desk right now, and it works because when you have a small space, when you're disabled, and when like you're the kind of disabled where you're mostly working from your bed, and sometimes you do need a desk, this convertible situation has been really nice, where like I can work from bed when I need to, and when I need a desk, I can just kind of pull it out of thin air, like a Mary Poppins situation.
I love that.
I love that. Like, I also have a small space to work with, and I definitely have a vibe to my room that I'm going for, but then I feel like my medical equipment sticks out so much, and like how you were talking about like making things pretty and like aesthetic is hard when you have like a ventilator and a suction machine.
For
Like
sure.
why can't companies make pretty ventilators?
I know. Ooh, something that I would do if I had a device that I did not like is think about how I could cover it or decorate it in ways that don't impact its function. So like either if it was something solid, maybe one of those peel and stick wallpapers or peel and stick tile things, and then you just cut it to the shape of your device. And then if it's possible without impeding on the function, spray painting it a different color, or like if you're into flowers, of course, that's one of the easier ones where like you get some artificial flowers from the craft store and you like you spiral it around the device so that it's like nice and floral and romantic.
That is a great idea. I can't do too much because I don't own it myself. But I love the idea of the wallpaper.
Yeah, like a decal, I think would work really well.
I'm gonna start up. I've been so inspired recently. I don't know why. I have a friend of mine that I hang out in their space a lot, and I was like, we can make your room so much more accessible for you. I want your bedroom to be accessible for you. And then I'm starting little projects now. I'm like, I want everyone to feel comfortable in their spaces and for their spaces to be accessible to them. And on a tight budget, figure it out. And I don't know, that might be a new little side project that I want to do, is like making examples of how folks can do that.
Yeah, that's a great side project because it goes into the like also it can help with like internalized shame and ableism in the like if you aesthetically like it. I've been having a lot of trouble with my joints in my hands lately. It's like the first real like since getting diagnosed with EDS. I've had lots of EDS symptoms my whole life. This feels like the first thing where I'm like, oh, this is impacting my day to day, and I actually can't just push through this and ignore it. I'm in pain, and so I've started wearing like compression gloves while I work. It can be helpful to not like hyperextend my fingers when I'm especially like when I'm typing. I'm noticing I'm like hyperextending everything. But the gloves are ugly. So I don't wear them because I'm like, I don't want to. I put together a cute outfit and I'm like, that's such an easy fix. Now I'm thinking like, oh, I have some friends who like embroider. I should like embroider some cute little flowers on my compression. Something that would just like make me feel like, oh, I want to put on these compression gloves. And there's
which ones are the ones that you do not like that you think are ugly? Or is it the gray ones?
Yeah, they're just like gray.
But there's some black ones that can look very cool.
Exactly. And that's what I think I need to do is like, I just got the most basic one because I was like, honestly still kind of struggling through some shame about it when I was ordering, and I was just like, whatever, the first one. And now I'm like, no, actually
pick the one that you like the least.
Literally. And now I'm like, hey, Lily, let's take some time to actually love these things. And like, yeah, it's just putting a little bit of like infusing some love into the things that help you. And then there's like a beautiful relationship there of like, I love these things. Because it's funny, I wear knee braces all the time, and I love my knee braces because I feel like when I put them on, I look like a kind of like spy, or like I'm like, they work with they're black and I wear black every day, so they match aesthetically, and it's like, it's kind of worth it to have fun. And I've seen people do really cool things like design like what you said with like fake flowers and putting them in their like chairs or in walkers, or like I think it's Lachi who has some really cool bedazzled canes that she's used, like just really cool, like just that infusing love into your aid devices is really cool.
Yeah, I think listening to you, it kind of narrows it down for me. You know, what are the benefits of putting that kind of care, you know, into our own lives individually in that way, and as part of, you know, universal design, architectural design, things like that. But individually, specifically, the benefit of putting care like that is for self-expression, is for diminishing internalized ableism, because it feels all the time like disability, not always, but for quite a few folks, disability is an aspect of themselves that feels separate of themselves. And when you take the time and care to kind of really infuse it into your identity with, you know, decorating it in a way that feels like you, then you can have an easier time accepting like, this is part of me. Because especially when a device does not feel like part of you, that's when it feels so separate from you, and you have a harder time accepting it as part of your life and as part of your identity and as part of who you are. But if you have the opportunity to go, wow, this is as, you know, part of me as my hairstyle or anything else, then it brings more peace and confidence to oneself to be able to do that.
I totally agree. Switching gears a tiny bit, and still talking about EDS, but we talked in the pre-production call a little bit just about getting EDS diagnoses. And, you know, a lot of times we don't talk about diagnosis a ton on this podcast because it feels like that's kind of like the story everybody wants from a disabled person, is like, how'd you find out? What was that like? But it's interesting when it comes to EDS. In my opinion, at least, I'm almost like looking to share that story a little more, because it feels like EDS was such an obvious answer to many of the medical problems I'd had, but I didn't know about it until I knew about it. So I'm just curious, like, what was your kind of, how did you figure out that it was EDS? And what was that like kind of experience like?
Well, like most EDSers, I guess I was experiencing symptoms since I was really little, and those look like falling down a lot, getting injured a lot. I personally, I don't know if it's everybody or so common, but like if we were in a PE class, a physical education class, I would always be last in lap running, because when you have EDS, your muscles are trying so hard to keep your joints together. So it's the joint difficulty while running, and a co-occurring condition is POTS, dysautonomia. So the exertion, the exertion and the heat, and I'm in Florida heat too. I was always finishing feeling like I was dying, like with my face as red as a tomato, and I would collapse onto the floor, like I would like fall to the floor, my back on the concrete, like like I couldn't handle it anymore. And the coach being like, "You're so out of shape, girl. Get it together." And I'm like, and the whole time I'm chronically ill. You guys suck.
Yeah, no, that's say it louder for the you guys suck. Like the through line, that experience we all have of being told, like, if you just work out harder and train your muscles more, and it's like, actually, no, my muscles work totally different than yours. Like,
yeah. All the while, we're probably the best at that little flexibility test that they gave us too. And that was like the one thing we were good at. And I don't want to speak for every EDS, I'm going to speak for myself, but like I sucked at everything else, physical fitness. And then they gave me that thing where you had to like reach forward and touch your toes, whatever. And it was the only thing that I could do. And I was like, and I didn't even have to try. I like, it's so effortless. So if that sounds like you, maybe you have EDS. But ultimately, like, it all caught up to me. And I've always, had like, a bunch of random physical weaknesses and illnesses, bad immune system, getting sick a lot, missing school. I would have horrible random asthma attacks. I don't have asthma chronically every day where I need to use an inhaler, but randomly I will just have some lung weakness and experience asthma for maybe a week or something, especially in temperature change. If like my lungs get too cold or whatever, randomly, it's weird. But yeah, I have to have inhalers handy for that reason. And when I was in my early 20s, I was working a job where I had to stand up sometimes for like a 12-hour shift with the lunch in between. And it was in high heels and things. And I had been told my entire life, thought, oh, I'm just out of shape. I'm just weaker, behind everyone else. I must be in so much pain because I haven't learned how to wear heels yet. Everybody else figured it out before I did, and I'm just behind. Like, I would keep convincing myself that, like, I was, what is the word here? Sorry for this brain fog today. I was like,
brain fog is more than welcome on this podcast.
I was inadequate. That's what I'm looking for. I was like inadequate at things because I didn't work hard enough to be adequate. Like it wasn't a disability. It didn't even occur to me. It was just like, it was something that I was like too lazy, or like I hadn't worked out enough, whatever, which is the voices of people my entire life telling me that same thing throughout my whole life. But eventually the pain that I was experiencing became so much that I couldn't stand up for more than 5 minutes before the pain level got too high. And then I finally sought medical help. I said, maybe I have a fracture in my heel or something. That was like that was a comparable pain. I was like, maybe it's a heel fracture. And I finally sought medical help, and they, I guess, examined me and said, you know what? You're fine. Just go home, put your feet up, and like, you'll be fine by next week. And that was just the start, because like, I don't know. I feel bad for anyone who would seek a medical professional and get told that, and then just be gaslit into believing that anything that happens from there on is in their head because the doctor said so. Anyone who like kind of very is willing to believe a medical professional, because that's also something that we are told a lot throughout life, is like, the medical professional knows better than you, and whatever they say goes. da da da. And I also don't like having to combat that as I speak right now, because I know that there is a whole nother face to that sentiment of like, don't listen to doctors, and that's like, you know, the face of like anti-vaxxers and things like that. So like it's such a fine line of like, there is science that we should be listening to, but individual doctors can have a tremendous bias when it's one-on-one. So like both can happen at the same time. I don't want to negate that like science and healthcare is important and that we should be listening to experts on those things. However, when it's just you and a doctor in a room, there can be biases against you as someone who appears like a woman to them, and someone who is a person of color or trans or whatever else. Like there are all these biases, and so many individual doctors are rushed for time, and like if it's not an obvious thing, then they are often very dismissive of it. So I just want to be clear on that. I ended up going in and out of doctors for like 3 years, different specialists, who, because the answer wasn't obvious, ended up being pretty cruel on different situations. I remember, because this is the first time in my life trying to go through a diagnosis search and seeing different specialists. And I didn't know this. I'm sure most people who've never attempted to do this don't know that in order to try to do this, the first specialist I tried to see was, I believe, a radiologist, not a radiologist, a neurologist. A neurologist. And I was stunned when I learned that I had to wait 3 months to see them. I thought, you know, there's something wrong with me. By the end of the week, I will know what is wrong, and I will get medication. I'll figure it out. This will all be over. Like that was my process going to the doctor for the first time. I was like, this is a heel fracture. They're gonna diagnose me. They're gonna cast me. They're gonna figure it out, and I'll be back on my feet, and it'll all go back to normal. But then they tell me, no, you want to see a specialist? You have to wait 3 months. So I'm waiting 3 months in pain, not knowing what to do. Not knowing how to get around. I finally, and all my, you know, hopes, I naively think, you know, okay, I'm going to see this specialist. I'm going to wait 3 months. I'm going to see a specialist. They're going to tell me what's wrong. We're going to find the solution. I'm going to be on my way. And those first 3 months, it felt so long. I was like, this is so painful. I just want this to be over with. I want to stop being in pain like this. And I get into his office and I explain everything that's happened. And his answer to hearing all of that was, okay, what do you want me to do about it?
Wow.
Ew. And I'm quoting verbatim. Okay, what do you want me to do about it? And I started crying. I was like,
how could you not?
What do you mean? What are you talking about? You're supposed to know. I don't know anything. That's why I came here. I don't know anything. You're supposed to know things. And he's like, shrug. I don't know. Your feet are? What am I supposed to do? And I couldn't believe it. But like, that sucked. And I just kept going on and on to like different specialists and trying to find anything. In the third year, I finally saw a neurosurgeon specifically. And he told me, based on like my gait, that like he thought the reason I experienced pain in my feet is because of an issue in my hips, a SI joint disease. And I was like, ooh, finally somebody said something.
Mm-hmm.
My SI joint is messed up, which wasn't wrong. He was right. My SI joint is messed up. And so I do experience a lot of hip pain, lower back pain, and that unevenness messes with my legs and my feet as well. So it wasn't wrong, but it wasn't the whole picture. And so he said that he wanted to give me a steroid in my lower back for the lower back pain, because at that point, 3 years in, I'm like, you know what? White flag. I'm just going to use a wheelchair to get around because there's no other way for me to get around. I can't walk for more than 5 minutes at a time. Like, I'm going to use a wheelchair, and I'm going to try to find a different job because my job required me to stand. I'm going to try to find something else. But if I'm going to be sitting, I need to find a solution for this back pain as well. So he gave me a steroid. And what I didn't know at the time is with Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, there is particular kinds of steroids that will break up your collagen. And when you have EDS, your collagen is already fragile. The way I like to give people a visual is like, you know, those Halloween cobwebs, the cotton that you stretch out. So like most people's connective tissue is the cobwebs when it looks like a ball of cotton. And people with EDS, their collagen, their connective tissue is what that cotton looks like when it's stretched out. So it's very like thin and fragile. So when you put steroids onto that fragile connective tissue, it's like grabbing a scissors and going snip, 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 snip onto the weak connective tissue. And so when I was given the steroid, all of a sudden I had zero strength in my lower back, zero like connective tissue, and I was stuck horizontal for 10 days because I couldn't lift myself up. I have no ability to like sit up. And that was really scary, but it passed. And I let that doctor know. I said, hey, so after I got that injection, I was stuck horizontal for about 10 days. And he said, that's not possible, and like dismissed it. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm making that up. What do you mean? And the thing is, this is 3 years in now, and I'm feeling so, this has started to really bottle up in me that I'm being gaslit over and over, made fun of over and over. All the while I'm experiencing so much pain and I'm losing my life. The life that I was living is gone. I had lost friends. I had lost time. I was stuck in bed and like lost and confused and just in a limbo of like staring at my ceiling all day, like unable to do anything, just experience pain. And he looked at my scan of my SI joint, which is like, you know, your pelvic area, your hip. And he saw that, and he saw that my joints were really far apart. They should be kind of like close together, but there was a separation. And he was aghast at it. He said, what is this? He goes, this looks really traumatic, like if you were in a car accident or something. And I said, no, but what we're looking at up there is more evidence. At that point, I had found EDS on my own. I said, I need to find somebody who can diagnose me. And that was thankfully to, you know, chronically ill community online and people suggesting it to me over time. And so I was collecting symptoms and data, like, I'm pretty sure this is what this is. So I pointed out to him. I said, hey, this is what I've been telling you it might be. It falls in line with what I've been collecting data on. So I think I might have it and I need to get tested for it. And his answer to that was, no, you don't have that. So, and he just continues going on to other things. It was a complete no. And he said, so here's what I want to do. I want to schedule you for an operation to fuse your joints together, to fuse these SI joints together. And I started crying in his office because what I just told him is that my body is not responding in typical ways to typical treatments. And by this time, 3 years in, I'd also already had another operation where another EDS fun fact, our bodies don't respond to anesthesia very well a lot of the time. So anesthesia and painkillers, they don't work very well. That's why I don't take any. And I try. I've tried so many things, but I had an operation on my foot, and they, in order to try to stop the pain or help the pain, and I woke up and I felt every incision. I could feel like everything. There was no numbness, nothing, and I was like screaming until I passed out, basically, just in like shock of the pain. And they tried to give me painkillers, and painkillers wouldn't work, and so I just felt everything raw, like for a certain amount of the recovery time. So when he said we're gonna put you under the knife again, and we're gonna try fusing joints together, I just burst into tears with like everything that had bottled up in my body. I'm like, all this medical trauma, like you put me through this operation already, and that's scary enough on its own, that like the anesthesia didn't work, and how much pain I had to go through afterward, and all the gaslighting and the dismissal and the cruelty. And I don't remember exactly what I said, but I remember like I attempting to advocate for myself through tears, like, you're not listening. Everything I remember saying, you're not listening. And like I slammed my hands on his desk, like I had autistically lost it in his office, with like high emotions, and just kind of having a meltdown, I guess. And in a very, I can't believe how things worked out, but a woman doctor walked into the office and said, and handed him something, and then looked over at me and said, why is she crying? Like, if this lady had minded her business, I wouldn't be here in this way right now. So she says, why is she crying? And he says, like, while rolling his eyes, she thinks she has Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. Like, I'm a freaking dummy or whatever. And excuse the ableist language, of course. But then she looks at me so kindly and she says, I've never heard of that before. Can you spell that for me? And I'm still blubbering, so I'm like, E-H. And she's like, don't worry, sweetie, I got it. And she like Googles it really quick. And then she looks up at my scan that shows my joints all separated. And she says to him, she could have this. And I'm not sure who she was or like what the situation was between the two of them. But he, again, rolls his eyes and he says, fine, I'll send her to a geneticist. And I was like, Jesus. So this is like probably the 9th specialist that I will see in 3 years. And I'm there with my little binder of collected symptoms and data and like all the things that I've been gathering over time. And I'm prepared to, the momentum is so like, I'm prepared to push up against the wall again. And so I maintain that visual in mind, and I'm prepared to like advocate for myself in that way. And I just kind of do the same spiel that I've been giving everybody else. Like, it started like this, and I've been doing this, and then I found this, and I've been documenting all my symptoms, and and prepared to like have to advocate for myself. And the first thing she says after my spiel is, yeah, it sounds like you could have it. And I was like, like, what a, like, all of a sudden, you know, the wall gave way. And like, I was like, oh, I don't have to push. I don't have to fight. And then, but the thing is, and this is where like luck comes in. She, for whatever reason, didn't feel equipped to diagnose me clinically. And again, because so many doctors don't know enough about it.
Right.
Doctors who do know about it, they can clinically diagnose you right there in office. They just like check a few boxes, and they're like, yeah, you, because the most common type, the hypermobile type, doesn't have a genetic marker yet.
Right.
So that's how they have to diagnose it. But doctors that have not seen it too often, they still don't feel equipped to clinically diagnose it in that way. So even though she believed me, she still couldn't let me walk out of the office with a diagnosis. So she's like, what I have to do, because I am who I am, is give you a blood test. And so for me, fortunately / unfortunately, I have a rarer type of EDS, right, than the most common type, and that is classical EDS or CEDS, and that did come out in the blood test. So with that, and you know what? At the end of the day, with all the gaslighting and the dismissal that I went through, like, I was glad that I had a genetic marker and like a very tangible, like unarguable way to say I have EDS. It's literally in my genetic markers. It is in my blood tests. And so nobody can argue with me ever again about whether or not I have it. So it's, you know, it's difficult in that when you have a rare one, there is even less research about it. So there's your whole life is a medical experiment, and trial and error. But at least psychologically, I have the comfort of like, you know, at least we know for sure what this is via genetic marker, and so I'm grateful for that.
Shout out to that doctor who walked in. It really is those people that like change your life, that I like, and are just willing to be like, yeah, maybe, like, it's so important actually. And what should have been when I figured out I had EDS growing up, I went through like 2 years straight of medical appointments because I was having like debilitating pain in my like stomach area, and I was like, I'd be standing up and then suddenly I'd fall to the ground because I'd have such an intense pain. And of course, you know, doctors are trained to like whatever the most obvious answer is. So I'm getting like colonoscopies and all of these invasive things to try to figure out what's going wrong in there. And then I happened to have a gynecology appointment, just like the routine ones. And I just was kind of lamenting to that gynecologist, who was a woman doctor, just being like, yeah, it's just tough. Like I've had a lot of appointments and haven't been able to figure anything out. And she was like, hey, 1 second. And she was like, can you do a sit up for me? And I was like, I'm not going to be able to. And she was like, just try so I can feel what your muscles do here. And she pushed on it. And she was like, yeah, your abdominal wall is torn apart. And I can feel it very easily. And I was like, and she figured it out so quickly just because she listened to me for a second. And then it was like, oh, so all these things I'm doing, the like extra working out, the trying to gain muscle, are making it worse. I need to rest and let this heal. And it's like, it's such a common thing. And I'm so sorry that you went through all of that gaslighting. It's such a common experience and shouldn't be. But that, you know, just major shout outs to those doctors that spend, often female women doctors, would love to have more male doctors join the charge of being advocates. I will say the doctor who did diagnose me with EDS, he was a guy, and he was very well versed in EDS though. And I went into that appointment though knowing like, man, doctor, I'm gonna be gaslit. I was like gearing up for a battle that day. I had written out my things I was gonna say to prove things, and I walk into the appointment and he goes, so you think you have hypermobile EDS? Show me your party tricks. And I literally, which could be seen as kind of whatever, but I was like, okay. And I did, because my elbows flipped completely inside out and my knee, and like 30 seconds into the appointment, he was like, yeah, I have no doubt that you have hypermobile EDS.
There's a part of me that would not like that coming into
right?
a medical space. I was like, no.
Every time I tell the story, I'm like, I have a different feeling about it, because I'm like, on one hand, it was so amazing that it was like lighthearted and obvious, because it should have been lighthearted and obvious. My whole, like, at some point, someone should have seen that my elbows popped completely out and been like, I think that's hypermobility. So there's something really beautiful about how quickly it happened. But then afterward, I'm like, I can't believe I'm accepting being asked like kind of an offensive question because it wasn't a battle.
For sure. Because, well, the thing is, I've had like medical students talk to me or ask me questions about EDS afterwards. And I've had really horrible experiences with that kind of line of questioning, like, show me your party tricks. My hope is that the doctor that you experience like would have accepted, like, actually, no, I don't want to show you that. It's uncomfortable. And like the way that this scenario would have been okay is like a secondary, like, actually, I don't feel comfortable showing you that. And he can give like a soft, like, I was just kidding. I'm sorry. You can go ahead and tell me, what
your daily pain.
Versus like, especially HEDS. Like, I know that HEDSers tend to have like more party tricks than I would too. Mine ended up hurting the crap out of me. But yeah, I've had student doctors try to learn about EDS through me, but I remember one of them specifically. God, I need to like rehash these stories back up, because if you don't do that for yourself, you will forget them over time. But a guy student doctor asked me about EDS, and I said, yeah, there's like, he asked about party tricks specifically, and I said, yeah, I can do some of those things, but at this point in my life, the connective tissue is too weak. So like, if I attempt to do them, I could seriously dislocate the joint. And I held up my hand like this to be like, see, like this, and I pointed out the connective tissue in my thumb is like too weak now. If I try to like bend it back the other way, I could dislocate it. And this guy, and he's not the only one, other doctors have done this as well, have grabbed my hand by force and tried to like force my thumb backwards after I just said, like, if you do that, you might dislocate it. Like, why are you forcefully grabbing my hand and attempting to, what's wrong with you? Like, I'm a human being. Like, 1, without consent. 2, to harm me, to see if I'm right about what is going to cause me harm. A la like a situation where someone says, I'm allergic to this food. If I eat this food, I will have an attack. And they go, no, prove it. Like,
literally.
That was the situation. And I'm just like, I cannot stand, like, the medical trauma is so extraordinary, where it is so hard to trust medical professionals because they have completely objectified our bodies, and they've completely like shown their asses in regards to like bias and prejudice. And this brings to mind on once upon a Twitter, there was a hashtag. It was doctors are dickheads, specifically to talk about how doctors have
gaslit all of us.
Gaslit and mistreated patients, misdiagnosed patients, and all the bad behaviors that patients have experienced from doctors. And it's definitely something to be worried about and to point the finger at, because there's such a horrendous power dynamic between doctors and patients. Like, they hold all the power. They hold where our names go on lists, on whether or not we can receive the treatment we need or the medication that we need. And it's awful that like somebody could be seriously sick or seriously in tremendous amounts of chronic pain, and a doctor can put their name on a list and be like, don't listen to this person. They are a hypochondriac. And then that's it for you. you will never get access to the care that you need because they put a label on your head. But that turned really ugly on Twitter because for this is what I don't understand. For whatever reason, I don't know if it's a privilege thing. I don't know exactly why, but people in a certain field cannot admit that there is a problem in their field and have to take it personally, and not just take it personally, but have this really emotionally immature response of like, well, fine, come into my office and see how I treat you. And like, we're like, that's the point we are trying to make.
Right.
That you do not have the emotional maturity to hold the position that you hold, because you cannot even listen to a conversation on the internet. You cannot even observe a dialogue that is happening about patients that have experienced medical neglect and medical trauma without making it about you as an individual, and without saying that you're going to take revenge on those patients. You are what we are talking about. And
the good doctors out there, the good doctors out there are, and I know this from like firsthand experience, in that while I was going through all of my figuring out that I was autistic, EDS, all of this, my sister was in medical school and becoming a doctor. And it's been really interesting having open dialogue with her, because she has just been very, very open to when I bring up these kind of issues and talk to her about it. She's like, well, yeah, that makes sense. The word disability wasn't in my medical school training very much. And even though it's like, that's crazy, which, excuse the ableist language, that doesn't make sense. But she's been really open to it, and thus has become, like, in her area, kind of known as like she's got, of course, unfortunately, long waiting lists, because she's a safe person for chronically ill and neurodivergent people to go to. And it's like, I see how now she's got these waiting lists and everyone wants to see her. And I remember when she was in medical school, the process of the American medical school system weeds out those who do not have that privilege. And like, there was so many times where she was staying up for 48 hours straight on her feet because she was doing rounds and doing these things and talking to me about like, I can't have mental health issues right now. I can't have body issues right now. Like, I can't have these things going on because I have to focus and work because I've been working at this degree for so long. And it's like, it almost to me sounded like these people being trained in medicine were being taught to like shove their pain down and not take care of it, not accommodate themselves in a way that this is all hypothesis from myself, but that like, I think that there are a lot of doctors who get very triggered by seeing people advocate for themselves because of the way that we have asked doctors to never do that for themselves. And it's like, which is why I'm such a big advocate for like, we need more disabled doctors. We need people with disabilities going to meds. We need medical schools that are accommodating and inclusive and accessible. Like that's the way you change the medical field. And open conversations like this.
Don't convince me to go to medical school right now.
Annie, I will convince you to go to medical school right now.
Personal fact in my life, like there's so many fields I would love to go into, and like I wish I could split my body up into like 15 different people so that I could like do all these things.
Heard. I relate.
I do, with the administration that we're about to walk into, I really wish that I could just like, upload all the medical information I need into my brain for when I need it. Because I feel like what we're about to experience next is more terrifying than like anything else so far, especially with the threats to like Medicare and Medicaid and things like that. Like I, as a disabled person, I'm trying to like strategize exactly what I have to do or what I should be doing in regards to medication and treatment before the literal threats of like that being taken away.
Right.
And something that, speaking of which, I'd like to like highlight, because not just in regards to the administration, but in regards to like climate change and things, a conversation that happens a lot in like, you know, I don't know if you feel the same, but like within my social circles is like, what do disabled people do at the end of the world, right? And like, it's funny because I've had an answer to that for a while, and I didn't realize that it was such a common answer. And I'm like, well, if everything collapses, I guess I'll just lay down and die. Like that was my answer. And I realized as I started having these conversations with folks that it was a lot of people's answer. Um, uh, I'm recently dating someone new this year, and we're actually about to be a year together in January. And this person has introduced me to a lot of really cool things. And one of them is that prior to ever meeting me, and she has not identified as disabled herself, that podcasts that she listened to that really stuck out to her was that conversation around what disabled people can do, quote, at the end of the world, right? And that while so many of us have very much like doomed ourselves in our brains, I thought it was really neat that there was like this optimistic view of like what we are capable of with community and with being able to exchange resources with one another, and that like so many things like the medications that we need and stuff like that, like as long as we have like allies in certain areas, like it's not, we do not have to like resign ourselves to like it's just not doable, it's just not possible. And it was the first time that I'd ever heard about that or thought about that, that like we don't have to do that. We can through community find the resources that we need, and it's still possible. We have not seen what it looks like to need this kind of a system, to need community and like DIY medicine and DIY healthcare in that way. But in case anybody wants to have a little hope in their body, like it really made me feel better to hear about that and know about that there are people who are trying to figure out what it looks like and what it means to have this underground disability mutual aid, mutual care kind of a system, instead of just resigning ourselves that like it's not possible at all. So once that was introduced to me, I was like, yeah, I'd rather think about it that way and try to organize and figure out how we can do something, as opposed to just resigning myself to that it's not possible.
Yeah, like disabled people have always had to have each other's backs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is not going to change. And the internet, especially, is helpful for connecting each other. So that's how I'm kind of thinking about that as well.
Yeah, that like, I mean, community. And you know, I'm the first to admit I am a like disgustingly optimistic person. Like it's maybe part of my autistic naivete. I'll admit it, but I am, my friends, I'm known as like the just go to her for positivity. And it's funny because when you first posed that question, the like, what do we do at the end of the world? My brain's immediate thought is just like, well, we find each other. Like, and that I love that I'm grateful that that's my brain's thought there, and that I have seen in action that like having friends who just recently actually like went through something where a friend's insurance didn't work to get their medication refilled, and it happened to be a medication that I had been on that didn't work for me, that I had extra of. And like even saying this on a mic at my work podcast, I'm like, oh, it's kind of nerve-wracking. Like, you're not like supposed to share meds and stuff, but it was like, I'm not gonna let someone I love suffer when I can help.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the
things like that, like stockpiling the medications that we need or that other people might need,
and
trans
knowing you
people
can
are thinking
reach
about
out
that too.
knowing you can reach out, I think, is really important. Like, I was so grateful to my friend who texted me and was like, I think I remember that you had tried this medication. Like, because it was like, yes, we have to be willing to say, I need help with this. And that that is something that I think the disabled community we're better at than most, is that, like, fuck my ego. Like, I need help. And I'm in the worst times of the world, I know that there have always been groups of disabled people helping each other and creating joyous moments. And so I hold on to that. And I'm so grateful for you coming on the show, being so open, sharing so much of your story with us. And I love that. I think that just like the EDS diagnosis, what you went through story is one we have to keep having, because some doctor's going to hear this, and that's important. Or I know my sister's going to share this with people, because that's what she does. Like, and these conversations where we're open are really important, because we can't just give up on whether it's the medical field or staying alive in terms of an apocalypse. We have to try to make it better in some way. And I think the work you're doing, Annie, is definitely doing that, finding hope and just showing the raw truths of this. So I'm really grateful for you, really grateful for your content. Listeners, give her a follow. It's like just, I love Annie's page. And I'm so grateful you came on this show, and we're so vulnerable. I can't explain quite how healing it is to be a brown queer woman who has been so medically gaslit and has eventually, like, in the last few years, discovered my autistic and EDS identity, to get to talk to you and know, like, I'm not alone in this. And to, that sharing that story of, like, well, your abdominal wall is ripped open, like, that is a traumatic story, but to get to share it with someone where we're laughing because we understand it. I think Erin and I have had so many moments of that where it's like, yeah, we're talking about ableism right now. It's not fun, but we can laugh about it. So we're changing, like, it's almost rewiring the pain in my brain. So I'm so grateful that you came on this show. And Erin, anything else before we sign off?
No, just thank you for coming. And I know, like, I've followed you for a really long time, and so I'm just so excited that you were able to come on and chat. It was awesome.
Annie's been putting in work on the internet for a long time.
Yeah.
We didn't get to this in this episode, but listeners, Annie's the person that created the, like, Stop Hating Your Body Tumblr, which also was Annie, you've been low-key healing me for a long time and didn't realize it. So I'm very grateful. And yeah, so if listeners go down that rabbit hole, find everything Annie's done on the internet. It's all awesome. And we'll see you next time for another episode of Everything You Know About Disability Is Wrong.
If you liked what you heard, go ahead and subscribe and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you to our listeners, and as always, thank you to Easter Seals for giving us the space and resources to share such authentic conversations from within the disability community to our listeners.
And we'll see you next time for another episode of Everything You Know About Disability Is Wrong.
Everything you know about disability is wrong.
This is a podcast brought to you by Easter Seals.
You know, we actually work for Easter Seals, but maybe our listeners don't know what we do.
That's true. Easter Seals is leading the way to full access, equity, and inclusion for disabled people and their families.
And did you know we've been doing this for more than a century?
This includes helping disabled people find meaningful employment and addressing healthcare needs for all ages.
We're proud to serve communities across the country and ready for the next 100 years. For more, check out EasterSeals.com.